This Dario AI situation is a complete mess, and the more that I dive into it, the more questions I find myself asking. And I'm on record numerous times saying Dario is one of my favorite companies. This one hurts, but we got to talk about it. Because I have a very strong theory as to what's going on here, and I don't think most people have it quite right. I think this is actually unlike anything else we've seen so far. I think a lot of mistakes have been made. And as this AI technology further and further ingrains itself in our society, there's a nuanced discussion that we need to keep having. All right, so where to start here? I'm going to try to give you the Cole's notes to the situation if you haven't been keeping up. So maybe if you haven't even heard about this, just sit this one out, turn off this video, it's not worth it. You know, as much as I hate this all, we probably do have to do this. Keep watching, let me tell you what's going on. A little while ago, Dario shared a demo with a song in it for a new product on their Instagram page. People were quick to point out that it sounded like AI. At some point, Dario was deleting these comments. And maybe the first big lesson here, if we've learned anything in society, it's that when you try to hide from something on the internet, it usually makes the problem 10 times as worse, as we'll see. So Dario shared a clip of the original recording session saying that that was proof that the song wasn't made with AI. Commenters and influencers pointed out that the audio from that session actually didn't match up with the original post. And at this point, the PR nightmare snowball, it's rolling, it's getting out of control. Dario then made a longer post explaining why these sonic discrepancies were there, why these AI artifacts had appeared, and they said that it was because AI mastering tools had been used. A lot of people claim that this was BS. Some people were in support of Dario. Some people just said that they didn't care about the whole thing. Dario responded to a number of these comments in the comment section. And that's a real quick recap of this whole situation. If you want a more robust understanding, I've linked Danny Sapko's series on this whole debacle in the comment section. And before we go any further, I just need to acknowledge some bias that I am just naturally going to have in this whole situation. You can take it for what it's worth, but Dario was the first company that I ever worked with. I have loved them and their strings long before I started making YouTube videos. My default belief based on this long relationship is that they are good people doing their best in this situation, and it's grown far beyond anything that they are equipped to deal with or even really understand. But having said that, when things don't sit right, and some things in this situation don't, I can't be quiet about it. All right, so first, let me tell you what I think actually happened here. Some of this is going to be based on assumption, and some of this is going to be based on information that either I know or have got from secondary sources who've got it from inside sources. I'm going to do my best to let you know when something is based on an assumption and when something is based on a fact. And so here's what happened. A Dario employee, who I personally don't know, took it upon themselves to make the music that would be used in the Instagram and social media promotion of this new product that Dario was launching. He took a piece of music that he began composing some 6 years ago, and I'm basing this on a comment that Dario left that I'm assuming this information has been verified at some point, but he took this composition and was rearranging it for this product demo. He went and recorded the guitar part using standardized methods that are used all throughout the industry. Now, my friend Rhett has the actual Logic file, which is the computer program that this stuff would have been recorded in, and he said that he went into the metadata and confirmed that these guitar parts were recorded some months before the actual product demo came out. And this timeline is important because there are people out there who believe that the product demo that Dario is taking heat for was just entirely generated using generative AI. And then after the fact, after they got called out, somebody went and then recreated this song in a Logic file to cover up their tracks. And so the metadata on these files proves that the guitar wasn't re-recorded as part of a grand cover-up. Could this metadata have been like faked or altered? We're getting into the realm of extraordinarily unlikely. It's very complicated to do such a thing, and especially like Rhett reached out to Dario and asked for these files and they sent them to him right away. So it's not like they would have even had time to go and perform this grand conspiracy. So I think it's safe to assume that the basis of this song, the root creation of it, wasn't generated through AI. A human composed it, a human recorded the initial guitar parts, but this is far from the end of this story. I'll also mention, I talked to Rhett earlier today. He's making a video where he deep dives into this whole world of things, looking at this Logic file. He's going to put out a video on this. If it's not out yet, it will be soon. Make sure you check his channel, and if it is out, I'm going to put a link up in the description. And so thus far, I don't think anything unsavory has happened. Some people might disagree with me, though. He recorded his guitar directly into the computer, and then from there added some effects, distortion, amp modeling, auto-tune, moving some of the rhythms around to make sure that everything was super tight, crispy, and clean, bang on. Some people might say like this kind of studio magic and trickery is cheating and dishonest. That's another conversation. That's not what the crux of the problem here is. He would have mined the guitar part when he played the video aspect of this. Again, another thing that pretty much everybody does. None of this is why everyone's upset. I don't personally find a huge problem with any of it. Everything up to this point is verifiable, but here's where things start to get weird, and here's where I am going to start making some assumptions, and I'll tell you why I'm assuming that stuff. Because the problem is the music that's on Dario's Instagram page doesn't actually match up with the logic file that's been shared. There are anomalies in the final product. There are oddities that are indicative of AI being in there. There's time fluctuations, there's alterations in the melody, there are tonal qualities that strongly point to AI. It's not conclusive, and all these things could be explained by other things. But the thing that I have a real hard time explaining away is that when you take this song and you run it through AI detection software, the stuff is pretty sure that it's made with AI. And the AI mastering tools that Dario says were used, they don't do this stuff. So this website and software here is one that a lot of people use. I know people who contract musicians and they run the files that they're sent through this to make sure that they aren't paying people for AI generated audio. And when I run the now infamous Dario promo song through this, it says that it strongly suggests that AI generated it. Whereas if I go and put one of my songs, which I know for 100% fact had no AI in it whatsoever, it's quite sure that it was made by a human. So if we know that this guy composed the song and that he recorded, at least the guitar parts for it, how do we account for the AI artifacts, and how do we account for this AI detection software? Software is not perfect, but there are a lot of things stacking up here. Dario claims that this was from the AI mastering, like Lander and some other things, but any of the stuff that I've used for these purposes, it doesn't do this. What my gut tells me happened here. I believe that these mastering tools that have kind of become a little bit more ambiguous the more that they've been talked about. I believe that these mastering tools were actually the mastering tools that are offered in the Suno Studio or something that works similar to that. And it's worth noting that this is all very new technology. I actually didn't even know this existed or how this stuff worked until today. But it actually explains everything, and to me is the answer that requires the fewest jumps in logic and anomalies to have happened. All of mastering up until 3 months ago worked in basically the same way. You took an audio file and then you tweaked that audio file, applying effects, EQs, compression, just working and molding that audio file. These new AI mastering tools work differently. They don't alter your audio file. They look at the audio file, they look at what you want done to it, and then build an entirely new thing based off of that. It's like if I write out a paragraph and ask somebody to go and proofread it and correct it, they're going to go in and apply their changes in my document. If I ask ChatGPT to do the same thing, it doesn't tweak around my document, it rebuilds an entirely new thing with those changes baked in. And maybe this is obvious to you, but I actually don't think most people know that it works like this. If you aren't caught up deep in the AI sauce, I would assume that you would think that these AI mastering tools work just like how everything else does. And if you had these assumptions and you went and ran one of your audio files through AI mastering and you weren't able to pick out the AI artifacts and stuff, which aren't the most obvious thing at first, but if you weren't able to pick out those, then you would just assume, yeah, this is working in the same way that mastering has worked forever. I think this is what happened. I think this is why it sounds like AI. I think this is why the AI detectors go off. It's why I think those fluctuations and those artifacts are in there. And that's also why I think Dario and the guy who made the song have doubled down and said, no, this wasn't generated using AI, because as far as they know, that's not really how it was made. Now, there are degrees of egregiousness with how you could incorporate this kind of thing in this project, and I have no idea where this specific project falls in my egregiousness scale. I think the worst thing that somebody could do is they just record their guitar parts for a click, take that stem, feed it into a Suno type thing, get it mastered, but then also get the entire backing track generated through Suno. The least egregious thing would be you record all of the individual parts, you plug in all the drums, you program the synths and all that sort of stuff, export the files, send them into Suno and say, hey, can you master this stuff for me? And then use what comes out as your final product. With this Dario situation, I don't think we can ever actually really know where things fall in the spectrum. But I think the bigger question here is anything along this spectrum okay? Because like, this is going to be happening more and more, and these tools are going to get more and more advanced. And what do we do when we find out somebody was using this stuff? And what makes this such a watershed moment here is like, there's no precedence for this kind of thing. We can't look back on a lot of other times this happened and said, oh, that was an adequate response. We overreacted there. Like, this is the thing that we're going to look back on to determine that going forward. Outside of our guitar and musical communities, I think the general population is pretty neutral on AI and largely oblivious of like what it does and how it works. Even within music circles, you can find people who are totally fine with this stuff, especially if they don't really fully understand how it works. Because you got to remember, this is all moving so fast. It just took over in such a hurry. When I tell people who should know about this world, what's going on, like more often than not, the response is, whoa, that's what's happening. I think right now, a lot of the frustrations we feel about this scary, existentially threatening technology suddenly has an outlet. We get to release some of that steam towards Dario and the guy who recorded this song using AI tools. And I think a question worth asking is there a level of grace that we grant them? Because I personally don't think anyone in this equation truly believed they were doing anything wrong. And I don't think they knew not to do the thing that they did, because they didn't even really have a precedent or an example to follow that has been set before where they saw what we're seeing now. Now, I don't think the next company who does this, and I'm sure there's going to be one, gets to plead ignorance, because this is too big. Everybody knows that this is happening now. I also don't think, based on my beliefs and my positive bias towards Dario, that there was a malicious conspiracy cover-up that happened after. I know that the employee who made this really quickly started receiving like significant backlash, like the kind of stuff that is like totally unwarranted in this situation. And what I think happened was he thought everybody was calling him out for using Suno. He was using Suno, but not in the way that everybody thought he was. And he didn't even necessarily understand the implications of what he did. And so I think what he did was like tell Dario or whatever that he was just using like ambiguous AI mastering tools so that it would hopefully like take away some of this heat that he was getting. Of course, this created a further backlash, which brings me to what I think Dario's biggest mistake that they've made in this whole thing is. I don't think Dario did their due diligence to figure out what was truly going on before they went on public record trying to quell the dissent that they were receiving. I think they need to get somebody who could really sniff out what was happening here. Because you gotta remember, like, this is a company of musicians. It's family run. It's guys who like care about strings. It's not people who are at the forefront of AI. You know, it's hard to say even if they should have known to get somebody in to look into this deeper. Should we have expected Dario to have been more suspicious? Should we have expected them to actually go and get somebody who could sniff this stuff out? Can you ask somebody to look for a problem if they don't even know that that problem exists? I do think going forward, we're going to see a lot more companies using AI detection software on music that they're going to end up using to avoid this kind of thing. I think that precedent has officially been set, but do we blame somebody for not doing that before this precedent has been set, I guess is my question. I think there were a lot of people who ended up in over their heads trying to diffuse the situation without even necessarily realizing that they were in over their heads. And now the optics are just bad. It looks like they were caught in a lie, and as soon as people become suspicious, it's so hard to undo that. And so with all this, what we know to be true, what we're theorizing, there are just so many discussions that need to be had. First of all, this is a massive PR nightmare born of what I believe to be more ignorance than maliciousness, what's an appropriate response towards that? Because you got to remember, AI is everywhere, and it came in so fast without even giving us a chance to adjust to it, to work out the growing pains. I don't even know if we've identified some of the growing pains yet. And maybe this is just what it's like getting old, but I don't like this. I wish I could just snap my fingers and freeze technology in 2004 or something. It's nice to be nostalgic about those days, but it's not practical. This is the reality, and we need to figure out how to navigate this. What's an acceptable usage of AI in music? And I haven't fully formed my opinion on this. Like, I'd like to say that I only want to listen and create music that has never had any sort of AI involved in it whatsoever. It's easy. It's black and white. It's binary. And for me, that works. Music is this very pure thing in my life, and bringing any sort of AI conveniences into it takes away some of the fun. It takes away the reason why I do it. All right, so that one's easy, right? But then I start to think a little bit obliquely about it. So I know some DAWs, or like the software that you use to record music, has built-in generative AI plugins. Mine doesn't. I use Pro Tools, not because it's great or anything. It kind of sucks in a lot of ways, but it's what I use. It's what I grew up on, and I'm too old to change. Pro Tools doesn't have the stuff in it, but other things do. Say I record myself playing my acoustic guitar into my DAW, and then I go click on a button and it generates a drum track to go along with my acoustic guitar because I can't play drums, I suck at playing the drums. What if I then go and record the singing and the piano and whatever else on top of this? You know, that alone, I don't love it. I wouldn't do it, but I could find a way of being okay with that, especially if this guy was never ever going to go and hire a drummer to do that. Because for me personally, outside of music, if AI makes my life easier doing some mundane task that I wouldn't have hired out to somebody else, and it frees me up to do the things that I really want to do, like, I feel like that's how we should be using this stuff. That's how I justify it when I use it. But anyway, back to our example. So let's say this guy, he's got his track, the only thing that was AI'd was the drums. Well, what if he then went and removed the drums and hired a drummer to play that part in, the drums just being a reference for what the actual drummer would record? And when I think about it, I'm like, is that much different than using a generic drum loop to fill that role? Whether or not you're okay with that, that's a personal decision. But I think that we can all agree that my example there of like using AI drums as a reference point is significantly different than just going to Suno and prompting it to spit out a tune. And there's a lot of nuance and gray area between these very different usages of AI in music. At what point does it become something that we're not okay with? At what point are we fine with it? Because say you are completely opposed to any source of AI use in music, like even just using it as a reference point. I mean, how would you even know that it's in there? Because to those guys, like, I got some bad news for you. This stuff is already everywhere in the music industry. Like, watch what Suno Studio can actually do.
These are all the different options we have for creating a brand new instrument right onto the timeline. So I'm going to describe solo trumpet, and I'm going to specify sparse because I want it to chill out a little bit. Okay, let's take a listen to our part.
In the backseat.
Because I know for a fact, a lot of musicians, a lot of music creation, even stuff you probably like, uses this kind of thing for sketches and demo creation. And there's no way you can even know unless you basically go and say, I'm not interacting with any music that was written after 2024 or whatever. And it raises another question, which I'm glad that I didn't have to ask myself when I was like trying to break through in the music industry, but it's, what principles are you willing to compromise in order to be part of the game? It's incredibly hard to build a career and make money in this industry, especially if you're not like forward public facing. If you're behind the scenes in that side of making things, it's just got significantly harder. If all your competition is using these tools, if you're isolating yourself by not using them, is that principle worth it? If it affects your bottom dollar, if it gives you less of a chance to have a potential career. In some ways, it actually kind of reminds me of the initial stages of social media when MySpace came around. There are people who loved it. I loved it. But then I also remember there were people who were adamantly opposed to using social media to promote themselves. And in hindsight, they could have had a point. I think there's a lot of negatives that have come from the social media thing. But once social media was widespread and fully adopted, everybody just started using it regardless of what they thought in the beginning. The AI thing, of course, is different and existentially dangerous in a lot of different ways that social media wasn't. But it makes me think about what happens when, not my generation, because I grew up in a world without AI. I know what this looks like before, I know what this looks like after, but like my kids who will grow up with a lot of this stuff probably normalized in their lives, they won't have that same stigma. What's it look like for a generation where this stuff is completely normal? Are there steps that we can take now to make sure for that generation AI is benefiting them, not this horribly detrimental thing? I think to do so, it's important that we voice our displeasures when individuals and companies and bands and artists make mistakes. But I also think it's important that there is a place where we can grant lenience and forgiveness, and we pick our battles when we want to put our foot down and take a hardline stance. I think there's only so much benefit in attacking individuals, because you got to remember, Dario may seem like this big corporate string giant, but it's so very different than a Fender. This is like a family-run operation with real people working in it that have real emotions about all this sort of stuff. Public shaming can have its place, but it really doesn't influence things at a fundamental level. All it really does is say, hey, what this guy did was really bad. You should think twice about doing something like that guy in the future. And I kind of always come back to the same place when I go down this AI rabbit hole, which seems like more and more lately. The true fixes come at a systematic, institutional level. We need legislature regulating these things. We need our politicians and elected officials making sure that AI is benefiting people and humans and society, not benefiting their pocketbooks. We need able-bodied, forward-thinking individuals holding important positions in office who actually understand this technology. No more of these geriatrics who've been voted in over and over and over again. Some of them, we don't even know if they're alive right now. It's a game of are they dead, aren't they dead, holding extremely high positions of power in the States. These types of people cannot be the ones that we're choosing to make these big decisions for us. This little Canadian democratic socialist dream that I have is that AI companies have some sort of built-in VAT-like tax. So if I decide that I want to pay for Suno or ChatGPT or whatever, there's a tax that happens right at checkout every single time my subscription renews. And then that goes into a UBI grant fund, which goes back into the musicians and the artists of the world to help people create and maintain their art. It's a big thing. And when I tell my American buddies this, they just kind of laugh and are like, good luck, pal. It would be lovely, but good luck. It'll never happen all at once. It's got to be incremental, small shifts. You make the changes you can. You encourage people to move in that direction, hoping that you might see something like this for our kids or their kids. Doesn't mean we stop fighting little fights. Doesn't mean we don't call out things when they need to be called out. It's just, I think more of the conversation should be about how we move the needle in that direction. And one of the things I would also ask you is what's been your relationship with AI? I know that there are some people who just hated it from the beginning, but I think there's a lot of us who also had a bit of a shifting opinion on it. For me, it's never been something that I've ever wanted to bring into my music. Like I said, that's a pure thing in my life. I don't want anything like that tainting that. But then there's other things, like when Midjourney came out, it was super cool to be able to plug in a prompt and see that thing come to life. But then the more I learned about it, the more that I used it, the more I was like, this just doesn't feel good to me. I now no longer like this thing. And then there's other elements of AI that make my life so much easier that I don't want to give up. Things that remove mundane tasks in my life, allowing me to do the things that I really want to do. It's an evolving opinion, and if you're like me, these opinions have evolved, in a private place with discussions with friends, that kind of thing. Maybe when AI first came out and you didn't really understand it fully, you used it in ways that you wouldn't think would be ethical now. We can look back at the thing and say, oh yeah, that was a mistake. I've improved. I wouldn't do that again. I moved on, a better person. I feel like the guy who made this song for Dario is kind of going through this, but instead of it happening in private, it's happening in front of the entire guitar community. He's certainly not without blame, and to this point, I don't think there has been a public acknowledgement of like what fully happened here, but at the same time, I think I still feel bad for him. Humans are not meant to deal with this kind of thing. We're evolved to be in groups of 100 people, maybe interacting with like 400 people in our entire lives. And here is this guy feeling like hundreds of thousands of people hate him, especially for something that I don't think was initially born out of maliciousness. If anything, it's laziness or ignorance. Critique is certainly warranted, but I think there is room for forgiveness in this whole situation. What I would like to see happen is just complete clearing the air from all parties involved and saying this is exactly what happened. We're not going to do this again, kind of thing. Because I know the guy who recorded this stuff has dealt with some things that are like way above and beyond, things that are unwarranted, things I wouldn't wish upon anyone. Actually, maybe there are like 4 people in the world that I would wish some of this stuff upon, but he's certainly not one of them, and nobody in this equation I think is deserving of the extreme levels of some of the hate that we've seen here. This specific situation had to happen. It was going to happen sooner or later. There was a powder keg that was just ready to go off. I think it's unfortunate that a company that has a long history of supporting artists and being a positive force in the music industry had to be at the forefront of it, but there's a lot that they could have done that would have negated this. And yeah, I think that's all I got to say on this matter. I wonder what the next topic we're going to be discussing in this whole world is going to be, because you know there's going to be one before too long.